Joining us now, author Tariq Fatah. His latest is called The Jew is Not My Enemy, Unveiling the Myths That Fuel Muslim Anti-Semitism. You've written another little non-controversial book, haven't you?
I have tried to.
Here we go. Your book, I must say, does paint a very vivid picture of what is said, shown, and believed about Jews throughout the Muslim world. Why don't you start us off? Just give us a few examples off the top here of what you're talking about.
Well, it is the depiction of Jews as essentially people that cannot be trusted, number one. And number two, a group of people who control the wealth of this world, who control the politics of the United States, who control the United Nations, and even control or inflict the bird flu on Indonesia or cause the tsunami. And it is bordering the ridiculous, but yet it is believed by some of the most sane elements in the Muslim world.
For example?
For example, a television show host in Pakistan who claimed that the attack on Bombay by Pakistani terrorists was actually carried out by Israeli commandos. And people believed it and still do. So there is a deep chasm in what is understood as reality and what mythologies have entered that reality.
You've had a few personal encounters with this as well?
Yes, my last visit to Pakistan in the year 2006 was very disappointing. I grew up in Pakistan where Jews, the word Yehudi was considered a word of respect, of awe and wonder as to a people who have contributed so much. I remember in 1963, the #1 movie in Pakistan was translated, it said, The Daughter of a Jew, and it won our version of the Academy Awards.
That was Jew as victim, though, wasn't it?
No, yes.
Rather than Jew as oppressor.
Yes, it was the main character drew the sympathy of the population, and that's a very Indian Pakistani way of portraying the heroine.
That movie would not be made today.
Oh, it couldn't even be considered. I tried to find clips of that movie. I couldn't find it, and today it's the exact opposite.
Let's be clear, though. You're not talking about Zionists, you're not talking about Israelis, you're talking about Jews.
Jews, yes.
That's right.
The word Jew is the one that the clerics, especially in Pakistan and Afghanistan, have latched on, and some in the Gaza Strip and Egypt as well.
This view that you've portrayed, you think it's across the entire Muslim world? Obviously not universally, but
well,
in the main?
The advantage is that 40 to 50% of the Muslim world is illiterate, so they haven't yet come across the hate literature that's printed. There is a vast number of non-practicing Muslims who don't go to the mosque, who are anti-Semitic as an act of patriotism towards their own community. And because nobody reads or confronts this idea, it is expanding, not because people want to hate Jews, but because there's nobody standing up to this hatred.
Let's do a quote here. I'm going to read a quote and then we'll unpack it. There's a lot that you've got into this quote here and some names as well, and we'll start to unpack it afterwards. Michael, if we can hear this graphic. My understanding of Islamic history and the Islamist teachings of Sayyid Qutb, Hassan al-Banna of the Muslim Brotherhood, and Syed Maududi of the Jamaat-e-Islami confirms that hatred of the Jew in Islamdom today is rooted in the narrative of the supposed slaughter of Jews by Prophet Muhammad, which makes it acceptable for a fanatic Muslim to kill a Jew. Okay, what is this? Let's do this. The supposed slaughter that you refer to there, what is that a reference to?
That is a reference to the Prophet Muhammad. Initially came and found refuge in the city of Medina, which was at that time called Yathrib, which was a Jewish-dominated town. And being monotheists, the Jews had welcomed Prophet Muhammad into that city. Subsequently, things didn't turn out quite well, and there was animosity between the Muslims and the Jews. But 200 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad, his biography turns up, and in that biography is the story of how Prophet Muhammad slaughtered or supervised the slaughter of 900 Jews. That's a story taken straight from the Masada story and given it an Arab imprint, and then circulated in the Abbasid in the 9th and 10th centuries as a warning to any Jew who would create uprising.
Is the story true?
Oh, story is absolutely false. There is nothing there. And there are two reasons why I say it is false. Because the Jewish community historically has been known to document its tribulations quite vividly, from the temple's destruction, the first and the second one, to persecution in Europe in the 14th, 15th century, to the horrendous suffering of some Jews even in the 11th century and 12th century in Yemen. But if you look at any Jewish writing, there is no reference to the killing of 900 Jews. And when you look at the physical evidence that Muhammad buried 900 Jews around the Mosque of Medina, I've been there. It's impossible.
So why does this story have any more legs than any other false story that may have been told throughout history?
Because in an era of Muslimdom, when we have nothing to accomplish, when we cannot win any wars, where 14 armies get beaten by a tiny force, where Pakistan and India have wars and Pakistan gets defeated, where Egypt gets defeated, where Jordan gets defeated, Syria gets a bloody nose, what do we rely on? Past victories. How do we tell the Jew or the Israeli that we got you one time, really bad? And so we bring up the story, our prophet did serious damage to you guys. So whereas Christian anti-Semitism is based and rooted in the notion that Jews were Christ killers or killed the Son of God, Muslim anti-Semitism is based on the notion that there was once a time when our Prophet Muhammad slaughtered you guys. So be careful. And it's absurd because it's not the Jews who are saying that Muhammad did this. This is the Muslims saying that. So I think for the first time, the defense is making the case for the prosecution.
Okay, let's go through some of the names here. Syed Qutb, who's he?
He is the post-Second World War Islamofascist activist of the Muslim Brotherhood, who suffered, by the way, at the hands of the Egyptian dictators, but who wrote the defining book on Muslim-Jewish relations, which is titled Our War with the Jews or Our Struggle with the Jews. It has been printed a number of times by the Saudis and is distributed widely in the Islamic world. And in that, Sayyid Qutb takes his views from post-Second World War remnants of Nazi ideology of the Jews, mixes it what he gets from Arab Christians and the Ba'ath Party, and with Islamic stories of how Prophet Muhammad slaughtered them, and puts it into a pamphlet and distributes it, and that's the defining relationship.
When did he do all this?
He did this in the 1950s.
And it's still a text of significance today?
Oh, it was published again by Saudi Arabia, Saudi publishers. It's distributed. It's in Arabic, but it has been translated as well in English now.
Okay. Hassan al-Banna.
He was the founder. He was the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood prior to the Second World War. He takes fascism from European fascist movements of the 30s, the notion of wearing a uniform, of having armed militias, having social services conducted not by the state, by a political party, exactly like the Mussolini's men did it, or in India we had the supporters of Hitler in the Hindu nationalist movement who used to have uniforms and social services. So it's a coming together of European fascism and rooted in false Islamic history that is anti-Jewish, and it becomes a potent combination.
There's one more to go. The third name, Syed Maududi, widely considered one of the foremost interpreters of the Quran in recent times, and he's from Pakistan, right?
He's originally from India,
okay.
A very destructive character. His books are distributed right now in downtown Toronto. If you come with me, you can see that at Dundas Square, on how to combat the Western world. He's a man whose English books today in many campuses are being distributed that say that I am not a Muslim as long as I do not indulge myself in armed jihad and to conquer the West. So he represents the Indian arm of the Muslim Brotherhood in its more ferocious form.
So you put these three together and it creates what?
It creates contemporary Islamism, which is led by fluent English-speaking, born in the West, young men and women who are very difficult to counter because they couch everything in the words of multiculturalism, of tolerance, democracy, freedom of speech, yet behind that layer lies their hatred of Western civilization, and at the root of Western civilization is the Jew who has created this mess for Islam in their perspective.
Okay, what about political leaders? Now, besides the Iranian leader, Ahmadinejad, who everybody's heard a lot from, are there Are there others who you would like to put on this list as well who have made a living out of describing the Jew as the nefarious influence in the world?
It's very unfortunate, but at the top of it is a man that I respect the most, which is Mahathir Mohamad, of former Prime Minister of Malaysia. I love this man because he's multiracial, multilingual, he's a Democrat, he won through elections, left through elections. But even this elder statesman is obsessed with the notion that the United States and Barack Obama are in the grip of the Zionists, and that is why the United States is not taking its troops out of Afghanistan and Iraq.
Can I read you a quote of his, actually? Michael,
Yes.
Admittedly, I'm moving a little forward here, but since Tariq brought up his name, let's go to the bottom of page 4 and bring up this graphic here. Here is the Malaysian Prime Minister back in 2003. The Muslims will forever be oppressed and dominated by the Europeans and the Jews. It cannot be that there is no other way. 1.3 billion Muslims cannot be defeated by a few million Jews. There must be a way. We are actually very strong. 1.3 billion people cannot be simply wiped out. The Europeans killed 6 million Jews out of 12 million, but today the Jews rule this world by proxy. They get others to fight and die for them. They survived 2,000 years of pogroms not by hitting back, but by thinking. They invented and successfully promoted socialism, communism, human rights, and democracy so that persecuting them would appear to be wrong, so they may enjoy equal rights with others. With these, they have now gained control of the most powerful countries, and they, this tiny community, have become a world power. You like this guy?
We are all conflicted. I like him because what he's done for Malaysia, what he's done to industrialize a Muslim society that was steeped in poverty and ignorance. I cannot agree with him or what he's saying. I'm just hurt that the person that I admire so much would be so steeped in anti-Semitism. And that is why I'm trying to explore, how can I be wrong in this? Is it possible? And the evidence is that no, it is not the Jews' fault that they're educated, they're enterprising. I've tried to convince my Pakistani friends that when the Jews came to North America in the 18th century, they were impoverished. They didn't come as, George Soros. They didn't come here as multi-billionaires. They came in the hulls of ships, and they were treated like trash initially.
Well, let's bring Israel into the angle then. How much of this Jew hatred do you think is rooted in the fact that Israel has, successfully defeated Arab armies since 1948?
It is a contribution. Israel's continued occupation of the West Bank is fueling this. And I say in my book that even the end of Israel, even if Ahmadinejad was successful in eliminating Israel from the map of this world, anti-Semitism in the Muslim world will continue. But if Israel facilitates the creation of a Palestinian state, the oxygen to anti-Semitism will be cut off.
You think so?
To a large degree.
Lots of people in Israel just, well, you obviously know this, don't buy that at all.
They don't buy it, but Moshe Dayan bought it, Ehud Barak buys it, former Prime Minister Olmert buys it, now even Prime Minister Netanyahu buys it, the great author Amos Oz buys it, the political scientist Shlomo Avineri buys it. I'm not alone in this. Mm-hmm. I think if I were an Israeli citizen, I would have the majority of Israeli population with me. Israeli Arabs agree with it. I visited and talked to Israeli Muslims. I went to a city where there was a banner, Allahu Akbar, at the entrance. It is in the Galilee. 100% of the population was Muslim. I asked them, what if this town was traded away and given to the Palestinians? This guy said, I'm Arab. That doesn't mean I'm stupid. They were in IDF uniforms.
Well, he meant, at least I think, if I understood your book properly, he meant he would rather live as an Arab in Israel than under Fatah or Hamas.
Yes, he asked me, are you willing to leave Canada and live under, and he mentioned General Musharraf. At that time he said, are you willing to live under dictator? Why are you asking me to live under Fatah or Hamas? We have problems with the Jews and we have problems with Israel. But I went to Nazareth, I asked people, are you willing to, what happens if Nazareth is given away to the Palestinian Authority in exchange for East Jerusalem? These guys were laughing at me. He said, could that be possible? I said, what if it was possible? It's a scary situation, because at no place in the Muslim world can a Muslim have democratic rights unless it's a non-Muslim state. Canada, Israel, India, United States.
But play this out for us then. Let's assume that some miracle happens and the talks that Barack Obama is championing right now in the United States actually bear fruit.
Inshallah, they will.
And may it
They
be-
will.
Yeah, well,
I'm very firm. I have a deep
we'll
belief.
see. We'll
Yes,
see.
yes.
But the question is, okay, what then? All right, some kind of Palestinian state is created. I don't know what it's going to
There
look
would
like.
be two
don't know.
Palestinian states.
Okay, but then what happens to relations between Jews and Muslims around the world as a result of the creation of one or two Palestinian states?
Let me give you the latest Pew survey results of Muslim, non-Muslim relations. 95% of Jordanians and Egyptians have a negative view of Jews. 70% of Pakistanis and Turks have a negative view of Jews. But 65% of Israeli Muslims have a positive view of Jews. They're the only Muslims who know and live with Jews on a day-to-day basis.
So the ones with the most contact have the most
Have a positive
impression.
view. How could you run into a Jewish person and read about the Jewish community and not say, wow, we need to emulate these guys rather than hate them? But there is no one willing to stand up to the mythologies that we believe.
You think Israel has the right to be a Jewish state?
Absolutely. The Quran says so. And I think
If
Jews
the Quran
don't read,
says so, how come there are so few Muslims in the world
because
who buy that?
Muslims don't read the Quran. How many Muslims have read the Quran? How many Jews have read the Quran? The Quran is so explicit that in one of the verses it says that we gave this beautiful land to the Jews. It does reprimand some of the Jews for not following the orders of God, but there are enough Muslims who don't follow the orders of Allah. So who knows that when the Quran says that when we punish them, maybe it is Muslims that have been punished.
Tariq, your book is called The Jew Is Not My Enemy, and I think it's fair to say that's a tough sell in a lot of the world. Many Muslims are not going to be pleased that you've written this book and titled it this way. What reaction are you trying to provoke in them by doing this?
Oh, I have taken the book to at least two clerics, imams that I respect. Both of them agreed 100% with the book, but wouldn't want to put the name to it. I have the unique, I'm very pleased that two of my Arab friends, one of them Palestinian, Jihad Alawiwi, has endorsed the book. Mona Al-Tahawi, who writes for the Washington Post, has said that. Professor Mehnaz Afridi, who teaches Judaism and Islam at the University of Antioch, read the book and said she agrees. And then we have Daniel Pipes saying that it's okay. So if I can bring Daniel Pipes and my Arab friends on the same plane, I might be doing something right. And I can live with the consequences.
Yeah, how many Muslims do you want to tell that Daniel Pipes has endorsed your book? That's a
All
kiss of
them.
death.
No, Daniel Pipes, by the way, he's one of his first books in 1990, was commissioned by the Muslim Islamic countries because it was the centennial, the 1400th year of Islam. And they asked Daniel Pipes to do that. Daniel Pipes is not anti-Islam. Daniel Pipes is anti-Islamism. I don't agree with his foreign policy. I don't agree with his Republican stance. But both him and Bernard Lewis are more educated about Islam than I think most Muslims are.
Your book, and you, I've known you a long time, celebrate Western, liberal, democratic values, which are obviously in extremely short supply in the Muslim world right now. Is it possible that you are not a Muslim in the way that the vast majority of Muslims around the world think Muslims should be?
I'm a Muslim the way the Quran and Prophet Muhammad wanted me to be.
Oh, I mean,
Absolutely.
that's a real hard thing to say, isn't it?
Try to negate that. The most companions of the Prophet were Muslims long before the Quran was even revealed. The only thing that makes me or anyone as a Muslim is to be a monotheist and to believe in the texts of, that have come forward. In fact, every Muslim is a Jew and a Christian. He couldn't be a Muslim without being that. And the only way anyone can be a Muslim or not be as a Muslim if they believe in the unity of God or not.
Do you hear yourself, though? I mean, that does sound kind of cocky, don't you think, to say, I'm a Muslim the way that Muhammad wanted people to be
Absolutely.
Muslims?
Someone should come and challenge me on that. That is why they will never agree to a debate with me in any mosque, anywhere in this country. Their audience, their time, let's talk about Islam. Not what the Muslim Brotherhood says, but what the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad says.
We hear the expression Arab land. We hear it a lot when we hear talk about the Middle East. The Israelis are building settlements, quote unquote, on Arab land. And again, you're a liberal Democrat. So the notion of Arab land or Jewish land or you know, any kind of land being tied to some ethnicity may be a difficult concept for you to accept. So to a Muslim today, however, it is probably a minimal requirement for peace in the Middle East to start a conversation with, well, wait a sec, this is my land, and then your position is, there's no such thing as this is ethnically tied land.
No,
so how do you square those two different positions?
I take it from where international law comes in. Israel was created by 2/3 majority of the UN General Assembly. Israel was created after UNSCOM came to British Palestine, at that time, Mandate Palestine, and had 3 pro-Muslim delegates in there, no superpowers there. I have seen the legal, I support both the Palestinian state and the Israeli state on the basis of legalities, not on the basis of inherited races or religion. I am a Canadian because I'm...
That's the opposite. That's the opposite to what your opponents would say, which is, this is my land because it's ethnically tied to me.
If they use that argument, if they want to invoke Islam and the Quran, then the Quran is on side of the Jews. Unfortunately, people don't read it. I've quoted all the verses in the Quran that, which says, God tells Moses, don't ask your people to leave the Holy Land or they will be punished. And until the coming of Israel, Muslims were mocking Jews, saying, well, you suffer because you left the Holy Land. Well, hello, they came back, and now you say you don't deserve to be here. Both people have a right to a dignified existence, the Jews and the Arabs. And it is up to both of them to settle it. I can only pray and hope that they succeed, because until this wound is treated properly, a fight against anti-Semitism in the Muslim world will not have begun.
Respond to this if you would. And you've heard it before, that you have somehow been duped into doing the work of the Jew. What do you say to that?
Oh, I don't have a problem whether I'm duped to do the work of the Jew or the Christian or the Hindu. I see the Muslim world stuck in a deep morass, unable to contribute to human joy, civilization, engineering, science, math, poetry. If I can't help my community wake up from this problem, that's my duty. That's got nothing to do with an axe to grind. I'm 61 years old. I'm not looking for some new career somewhere. This is the last innings, what I call the dawn of my dusk. If people like me, who had the good fortune of living in a democracy and having read Islamic and Jewish history, are not willing to act as Canadians, being neutral umpires in a war of words and hate, then who else?
Have you changed any minds?
I have many minds, but I have not been able to instill in them the courage to come out and say, yes, Tariq Fatah has changed my mind.
And they won't come out and say it because why?
They've got daughters to wed, mothers to bury, children that have to be born. There are 3 entry points for Muslims that are controlled, choke points controlled by the clerics: birth, death, and wedding. And I have not yet been to an Islamic university to get the credentials of a cleric. I wish I lived long enough, and I'll get that, and I'll take them at face value.
When do you think we're going to see a time when what you believe is more conventional wisdom in the Muslim world rather than the views of, I'm sure, what they would consider to be a heretic?
Today is a good day. Calgary has elected its first Muslim mayor. If there was Islamophobia in the West, Nahid Ninshi could not have got elected in Calgary. Fareed Zakaria would not be reading the most popular news item. Ali Walshi would not be telling CNN how to be. We have a situation in the West where people are willing to embrace Muslims. The Islamists want us to not be in a situation where we get along with atheists, Jews, Christians, agnostics, Hindus. And that is a problem that confronts us, and that is one that I feel I have to challenge.
And you think you will out in the end?
Inshallah.
Inshallah, there's that word again. The Jew is not my enemy. Tariq Fatah has been our guest. Thanks so much.
Thank you.